The Galactic Council chamber floated in the void between stars. A massive station where 5 species had gathered to face their greatest threat, yet Ambassador Cowris stood at the center podium, her chitinous form gleaming under the artificial lights, and her compound eyes reflected the holographic displays showing system after system falling to the Rex invasion. Another world burns, she announced, her translator converting her clicking speech into standard. The million colonies in Sector 7 have gone dark. Around the circular chamber, representatives from the other species shifted uncomfortably. Commander Dollars of the Corthan slammed his forearms against his console, the warrior's orange skin flushing darker with rage. 3 months, he roared, his voice echoing through the chamber. 3 months we have fought and bled while the humans sit at the edge of our space doing nothing. Admiral Chen Wei watched the proceedings from the human observation deck, high above the main floor, her face expressionless as she listened to the Corthan commander's anger. Her uniform was crisp and clean, untouched by battle, which made her feel like a coward even though she was following orders. Beside her, Captain Rodriguez whispered, "The crew is getting restless." "Admiral, I know," Chen replied without looking at him. "They want to fight," Rodriguez continued. "Every day, we receive reports of colonies falling, and our people sit in their ships playing cards." Chen's jaw tightened, but she said nothing below. Ambassador Caloris raised one of her 6 limbs to call for order. "Commander Tharos, you know why the human fleet cannot engage," she said carefully, each word measured. "Protocol 7 Alpha is clear and binding." "Protocol?" Tharos spat the word like poison. "While we speak of protocols, the Rex consume entire populations. What good are 50 human battleships if they never fire a shot?" The Osiri representative, a floating crystalline being named Loomis, chimed in with harmonics that translated as concern. "Perhaps it is time to revisit the protocol. Our losses are catastrophic. The protocol exists for good reason." Caloris insisted, though her voice carried less certainty than before. "Then tell us the reason," demanded Tharos. "The records are sealed. No one alive remembers why this rule was made." An uncomfortable silence fell across the chamber. Chen knew the answer. Every human officer above a certain rank knew, but they were forbidden from speaking of it. The Zentari ambassador's antennae twitched nervously as she accessed her personal datapad, one that contained classified information passed down through centuries of Zentari leadership. 200 years ago, Caloris began slowly. "There was an incident on the frontier." "The frontier incident," Tharos interrupted. "Yes, we all know the name, but none of us know what happened." Caloris's compound eyes seemed to dim as she read from the ancient file. A human colony was attacked by pirates from the Krell Expanse. The pirates killed 10,000 human civilians in what they thought would be a simple raid. She paused, her translator struggling to convey her emotional state. The human response was... She searched for words. "Disproportionate." "Disproportionate how?" asked Loomis. "The humans tracked down every pirate ship, every base, every station that had given the raiders supplies or shelter," Caloris continued. "They destroyed them all. Not just destroyed, they erased them from existence." Tharos waved dismissively with 2 of his arms. "That sounds like justice to me. They killed 4 million Krell in retaliation for 10,000 humans," Caloris said quietly. "They used weapons that we didn't know civilized beings could create." The chamber went silent. The Krell begged for peace after the first week. Caloris went on, reading from her datapad. "The humans ignored them. They begged again after a month. Still the humans continued. It took 6 months before the humans stopped. And by then the Krell Expanse had been reduced to rubble and ash." Chung closed her eyes, remembering the classified footage she had been forced to watch during her command orientation. The images still haunted her dreams, human warships doing things that made her stomach turn. Tactics that were brutally effective but morally horrifying. The Krell started that conflict. Caloris said, but the humans finished it in a way that terrified every species in the Alliance. So the protocol was created out of fear? Tauros asked, his rage cooling into something more thoughtful. The protocol was created out of necessity, Caloris corrected. For the benefit of everyone, hold the human battleships distant from the war. That was how it was phrased. The humans agreed to the restriction. Captain Rodriguez leaned toward Chun and whispered, "They make us sound like monsters." "We are," Chun replied softly. "At least, we can be when we choose to be on the main floor." The debate continued. The Melian representative, whose homeworld had just fallen to the wrecks, spoke through tears. "Perhaps monsters are what we need right now. You don't understand what you're asking for," Kelrus warned. "Then explain it to us." Tauros demanded again. His patience exhausted, Chris looked up at the human observation deck. Her compound eyes meeting Admiral Chun's gaze across the distance. Chun gave the slightest nod. "Permission granted. Come to my quarters after this session," Kelrus said to Tauros. "I will show you the classified files. Then you will understand why we must never, ever unleash the humans unless we have absolutely no other choice." Hours later, in the privacy of Ambassador Kelrus's diplomatic suite, she played the footage for Commander Tauros, Corthan warrior, watched in silence as human ships demonstrated tactics that violated every convention of civilized warfare. He watched humans use psychological weapons that drove enemy crews insane. Watched human Marines fight with a cold efficiency that treated warfare as a science rather than a conflict between equals. When the footage ended, Tauros sat in stunned silence for several minutes. "They fought like they were exterminating vermin," he finally said. "Exactly," Kelrus replied. "To humans, there is no honor in war, no glory, no rules that cannot be broken if breaking them means victory. But surely they wouldn't." "They would," Kelrus interrupted. "And they will if we revoke the protocol. The humans don't wage war to prove their courage or test their strength. They wage war to win. By any means necessary." Tauros looked at his own 4 hands. Hands that bore scars from dozens of honorable combats, and tried to imagine fighting the way the humans did. He couldn't. This entire species based their culture on warrior honor, on facing enemies with courage and strength. The humans in that footage had displayed neither only a terrifying, cold determination to destroy their enemies completely and without mercy. "The Vreks are pushing closer every day," he said quietly. "I know," Kelrus replied. "If they reach the core worlds." "I know," she said again. "Can we win without the humans?" Kelrus's antennae drooped, a gesture of deep sadness among her people. "I don't know." Back on the carrier, relentless, Admiral Chun stood on the bridge watching her crew perform routine drills. They were good people, well-trained and disciplined. But she could see the frustration in their eyes. Every report of Rex victories felt like a personal failure. Her communications officer approached with a datapad. "Admiral, another request from Corthan Command, asking when we'll join the fight." Chun took the datapad and deleted the message without reading it. "Tell them we're bound by Alliance protocols." "Yes, ma'am." Chun walked to the observation window and stared out at the 50 human warships floating in formation, each one carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. She thought about the Frontier incident, about the things her predecessors had done in humanity's name. She thought about the protocol that kept them leashed. And she wondered if that leash was protecting the Alliance from the Vreks, or protecting the Alliance from humanity itself in the distance. Stars twinkled peacefully, but Chun knew that beyond the edge of Alliance space, those same stars were watching worlds burn. The question wasn't whether humanity would be unleashed. The question was what would be left of everyone's souls when the war finally ended. The Melian homeworld died on a Tuesday. Admiral Chun watched the feeds from the safety of the Relentless. Her command ship, positioned exactly where the protocol required, distant from the ward. Wreck swarm descended on the planet like locusts, their organic ships pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that signaled hunger and conquest. Final transmission from Surface Command, her communications officer reported, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. They're begging for help. Admiral Chung forced herself to watch as the lights across the Melian cities went dark one by one. 15 billion souls lived on that world. 15 billion souls that she could have saved if only she were allowed to move her fleet forward. Log the transmission, she ordered, her voice flat and professional. Forward it to Alliance Command. Admiral Captain Rodriguez stood beside her chair, his voice barely above a whisper. We could be there in 6 hours. We have our orders, Captain. To hell with orders. Rodriguez snapped, louder than he intended, drawing looks from the bridge crew. We're watching genocide while we sit here with our thumbs up, our Captain. Chen's voice cracked like a whip. You will maintain your composure, or you will be relieved of duty. Rodriguez's face flushed red, but he stepped back and saluted. Yes, Admiral. The bridge fell silent, except for the quiet beeping of sensors and the hum of the ships. Systems Chen wanted to scream, wanted to order her fleet forward and damn the consequences. But she had seen the classified files. She knew what humans became when the leash came off. She knew. And that knowledge was a weight that threatened to crush her. 3 systems away, Commander Thalros led what remained of the Corthan defensive fleet in a desperate battle above. Asiri Prime, the crystalline beings who called this world home, had already evacuated their young to underground bunkers. But millions of adults remained on the surface, unable to flee. Focus fire on the lead bioships. Thalros commanded from his flagship, the Crimson Warrior. Don't let them reach the atmosphere. His fleet of 200 warships had been 400 strong just 2 weeks ago. The wrecks kept coming, kept adapting, kept overwhelming them with sheer numbers. A young officer at the tactical station called out, Commander, their formations are shifting. They're learning our attack patterns. Then we change patterns. Thalros roared, all ships, execute maneuver Theta 9. The Corthan vessels spun and dove in a coordinated dance of violence, their weapons blazing trails of superheated plasma through the void. They destroyed dozens of wrecked ships, then hundreds, but for every enemy vessel that fell, 3 more appeared to take its place. Sir, his second-in-command said quietly, at this rate of loss, we'll be combat ineffective in 4 hours. Thalros knew the mathematics of warfare, knew when a battle was unwinnable. But the thought of retreat while civilians cower below made his honor burn with shame. Signal the fleet, he said heavily. Prepare for final defensive stand. All ships will, Commander. The communications officer interrupted. Urgent transmission from Alliance Command. It's Ambassador Kelris. Thalros' tactical display blinked as the ambassador's face appeared in miniature, even through the hologram. He could see the strain in her compound eyes. Commander Thalros, Kelris said without preamble, I am authorizing a strategic withdrawal of all Corthan forces from Asiri Prime. Withdrawal? Thalros felt his warrior's pride rebel at the word. Ambassador, there are civilians. I know. Kelris interrupted, her voice carrying a weight he had never heard before. Believe me, I know. But I need you and your fleet intact for what comes next. What comes next? Thalros demanded. We're losing on every front. The wrecks have deployed a super-high fleet, Kelris said. And even through the transmission, Thalros heard the fear in her voice. 200,000 bioships are heading directly for the Zentari core worlds. My homeworld. Commander, they're coming for my people. The number staggered Tauros 200,000 ships was more than the entire combined Alliance fleet. When will they arrive? He asked, his anger cooling into professional assessment. 96 hours, Calrus replied. Maybe less. Tauros understood immediately. She was calling him back not because Asiri Prime didn't matter, but because the Zentari homeworld had 40 billion inhabitants. It was brutal calculus, the mathematics of triage. Choosing which populations to save when you couldn't save them all. I'll begin withdrawal immediately, he said. But Ambassador, 40 billion people against 200,000 wreck ships. Even if every Alliance vessel converges on your system, we don't have enough firepower. I know, Calrus said softly. That's why I'm calling an emergency council session. It's time to discuss revoking Protocol 7 Alpha. Thalros felt his breath catch in his throat after seeing the classified footage of what humans did during the Frontier incident. Part of him recoiled at the idea of unleashing that horror into the galaxy, but another part of him, the part that had just watched helplessly as worlds burned, wondered if horror was exactly what they needed, the humans? He asked carefully, for the benefit of everyone. We have held the human battleships distant from this war, Calrus quoted the protocol. But I am no longer certain that isolating our most powerful weapon serves anyone's benefit. Have you spoken with Admiral Chun? Not yet, Calrus admitted, but I will. First, I need to show the Council what we're truly facing. The transmission ended, and Thalros looked out at the battlefield where his ships were still dying to buy a few more hours for. Asiri civilians, all ships, he commanded, his voice heavy with the weight of command. Break off engagement and retreat to Rally Point Gamma. I know this goes against everything we believe in, but we have new orders. As his fleet began its withdrawal, Thalros wondered if they were making the right choice, or if they were about to unleash something far worse than the wrecks in a research station orbiting a dead star. A young Korthan intelligence officer named Drax was sifting through ancient human records, trying to understand why Protocol 7 Alpha existed. Most of the files about the Frontier incident were classified, but fragments remain in historical databases, academic papers, and old news archives. What Drax found disturbed him more than any battle footage. Found a human phrase buried in an anthropological study. War crimes are just crimes we haven't been desperate enough to commit yet. He found references to something humans called the Geneva Conventions, which were apparently guidelines for civilized warfare. One human historian had written, "Every species in the Alliance treats the laws of war as sacred obligations. Humanity treats them as suggestions to be followed when convenient." Drax found casualty ratios from human conflicts throughout their history, numbers that made no sense according to standard military doctrine. In one conflict called World War II, humans had deliberately targeted civilian population centers with weapons designed to create firestorms. Another conflict, humans had deployed chemical weapons that caused agonizing deaths, then banned those same weapons, not because they were ineffective, but because they were too effective. The more Drax read, the more he realized that humanity's approach to warfare was fundamentally different from every other species. The Korthan fought for honor, the Siri fought for harmony, the Millions fought for survival, Zentari fought for territory, but humans fought for victory. And they seemed willing to sacrifice anything, including their own humanity, to achieve. I've compiled his findings into a report and sent it to Commander Thalros with a simple message. Sir, if we revoke the protocol, we need to understand what we're asking these beings to become. Admiral Chun received the private communication from Ambassador Calrus at 03:00 ship time. She was in her quarters, unable to sleep, staring at photos of her daughter back on Earth. Admiral, Calrus's voice came through the secure channel. I need to speak with you about the protocol. Chun had been expecting this call for weeks. You want to revoke it. I want to know if you think we should, Calrus corrected. 40 billion of my people are going to die unless something changes. Chan closed her eyes, thinking about what her ships could do with the restrictions removed. She thought about the tactics that were forbidden under the protocol, the weapons, the strategies, the ruthless efficiency that made humanity simultaneously the Alliance's greatest protector and its greatest fear. If you revoke the protocol, Chum said slowly, my fleet will stop the wrecks. I can promise you that, but, Kelris prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation. But you need to understand what you're asking, Chung continued. We won't fight like the Korthan or defend like the Assyri, we'll fight like humans. And that means doing things that will give your people nightmares for generations. Will you follow the Alliance rules of engagement? We'll target only military assets, Chun promised. But our definition of military assets might be broader than yours. There was a long silence on the line finally. Kelris spoke. Send me updated footage from the Frontier incident. I need to show the Council exactly what they're voting for. Chun transferred the files, each one marked with the highest security classification, Ambassador. She said before ending the call. Once you open this door, you can't close it again. Make sure your people understand that, after the transmission ended, Chun stood and walked to her weapon locker. Inside was her service pistol. Cleaned and maintained, but never fired in anger. She wondered if she would remain that person, the one who had never. The emergency council session convened aboard the massive Alliance flagship Unity's Hand, a neutral vessel that had never seen combat in its 300 years of service. Representatives from all 5 species gathered in the Grand Chamber. But this time, the atmosphere was different, charged with desperation and fear. Ambassador Kelris stood at the central podium, her compound eyes scanning the assembled delegates, and her antennae trembled slightly as she prepared to speak. We are here, she began, her voice amplified throughout the chamber, to vote on a matter that our predecessors hoped would never be necessary. The revocation of Protocol 7 Alpha on the screens surrounding the chamber. Live feeds showed the Vrex Superhive fleet advancing through space like a plague. 200,000 bioships, all moving in perfect coordination. Their destination clear, the Zentari homeworld and its 40 billion inhabitants. Commander Thalros sat in the Korthan delegation section, his forearms crossed over his broad chest, his orange skin darker than usual with tension. The Melian representative, Keeper Solis, had tears flowing freely down her face. Her entire homeworld had fallen just days ago, and now she was watching another world face the same fate. The Assyri delegate Loomis floated in crystalline stillness, his harmonic voice silent for once and high above. In the observation deck, Admiral Chen Wei watched with her senior staff, knowing that within hours her entire life might change. Before we vote, Kelris continued, I must show you what you are voting for. Not theories or ancient history, but the reality of human warfare. The lights dimmed and the holographic displays shifted to show footage from the Frontier incident. The council members watched in growing horror as human warships demonstrated tactics that violated every convention of civilized combat. They saw humans deploy weapons that targeted enemy psychology, rather than just their bodies, devices that drove entire crews. Insane with manufactured fear, they saw human Marines moving through enemy ships with mechanical efficiency, showing no mercy and asking for none. They saw a human captain order the destruction of a surrendering vessel because prisoners slow us down. When the footage ended, the chamber remained dark for several long moments. Finally, the lights returned, and Kelris spoke into the stunned silence. This is what humans become when we remove their restrictions. This is what we are voting to unleash. Good, Commander Thalros said loudly, standing up from his seat. The Vrex don't negotiate, don't surrender, don't show mercy. Why should we fight them with one hand tied behind our backs? Because we are civilized beings. protested Councilor Marin, a junior Zentari diplomat. "We have rules for a reason. Your civilization will be extinct in 72 hours. Tharos shot back. "Tell me, Counselor, how much will your rules matter when your world is ash?" The argument erupted across the chamber, voices raised in multiple languages. Translators struggling to keep pace with the heated debatteurs raised her limbs high and called for order. "Enough. We will hear from each species, and then we will vote. This is too important for chaos." She gestured to the Melian section. "Keeper Solus, your people have suffered the most in this war. What is your position?" Solus rose slowly, her flowing robes stained with the dust of her fallen homeworld. "My people are refugees now," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "We float in ships and temporary stations. Homeless because we waited too long to make hard choices. I have seen the footage of human warfare, and yes, it terrifies me." She paused, wiping tears from her face. "But it terrifies me less than watching another world die. The Vrex gave us no mercy. I vote yes to revoke the protocol." A murmur ran through the chamber. Callus gestured next to Loomis. The Assyri representative, the crystalline being, floated forward, his body refracting light in patterns that conveyed deep sadness. "My people have always valued harmony. Peace, the elegant solution to conflicts. What the humans do, it is the opposite of everything we believe in." The chamber waited, expecting him to vote no. "But my world still stands because the Corthan fleet bought us time with their sacrifice," Loomis continued, his harmonics growing stronger. "And Corthan fleet survives because they retreated before being wiped out completely. We are playing a game where only the Vrex know the rules, and those rules say, consume everything." His crystalline structure pulsed with light. "Sometimes harmony requires discordant notes. I vote yes." Commander Tharos stood for the Corthan. "My species has built our entire culture on warrior honor, on facing enemies with courage and strength. What I saw in that footage was not honorable. It was brutal, cold, efficient." He swept his gaze across the chamber, and it was exactly what worked. The humans in that footage won their war completely and decisively. They didn't fight for glory or to prove their courage. They fought to win. And they did. His four fists clenched simultaneously. "I vote yes. May my ancestors forgive me." 3 votes for revocation. Chamber turned its attention to the final species. The Zentari themselves, Ambassador Kelrus, looked at her fellow Centauri counselors, seeing her own fear reflected in their compound eyes. "This is my world that faces destruction," she said quietly. 40 billion of my people who will die screaming if we do nothing. I have spoken with Admiral Chun. I have reviewed every file we have on human warfare. And I understand now why our ancestors created this protocol." She paused, her antennae drooping in a gesture of profound sadness. "They created it not to protect humans from us, but to protect us from what humans become in total war. They created it because they knew that if we ever truly needed the humans, if we ever unleashed them completely, it would mean we had already failed in every other way." The chamber held its breath. "But we have failed," Kelrus continued. "We have failed to stop the Vrex, failed to protect our own people, failed to find any solution except the one we swore we would never use." She looked up at the observation deck where Admiral Chun stood watching. "The protocol states, for the benefit of everyone, hold the human battleships distant from the war. I propose we change that to, for the survival of everyone, unleash them." Her voice grew stronger. "I vote yes to revoke Protocol 7 Alpha." The chamber erupted into noise, some cheering, some protesting, some simply crying. Kelrus struck her podium to call for order. "The vote is unanimous. Protocol 7 Alpha is hereby revoked with the following conditions. Human forces are authorized to engage Vrex military assets using any tactics deemed necessary for victory." She paused. "However, Human forces will not target civilian populations or infrastructure unless absolutely required for military success. Admiral Chun, you are weapons-free. High above in the observation deck. Chun felt her heart rate increase as the words she had both dreaded and anticipated finally came. Captain Rodriguez looked at her with wide eyes. Admiral? Send the signal to the fleet, Chun ordered, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. All ships are to prepare for immediate departure. Rules of engagement. Unrestricted warfare authorized. Rodriguez hesitated. Admiral, are we really going to? Yes, Chun interrupted. We're going to do what they asked us to do. What they should have been terrified to ask us to do. She turned to address her staff. Get me fleet-wide communications. Moments later, her face appeared on screens throughout all 50 human warships in mess halls and engine rooms. On bridges and in fighter bays. This is Admiral Chen Wei to all human forces, she began. 3 months ago, we were placed under Protocol 7 Alpha and ordered to remain distant from this war. We watched our allies fight and die, watched worlds burn, watched civilians beg for help that we were forbidden to provide. She paused, letting her words sink in. That changes now. The Alliance Council has revoked the protocol and authorized unrestricted warfare against the Vrex threat. In 72 hours, 200,000 enemy vessels will reach the Zentari homeworld on screens throughout the fleet. She could see her crews reacting, some cheering, some looking worried. All of them standing a little straighter. They asked for humans, Chun continued, her voice harder now. They asked us to save them after every other option failed. So we're going to save them, but we're going to do it our way. She looked directly into the camera. No more fighting with one hand tied behind our backs. No more watching enemies retreat to fight another day. No more pretending that war is some kind of honorable sport. We're going to show the galaxy why our ancestors agreed to the protocol in the first place. On the bridge of the carrier Relentless, crew members stood frozen at their stations. We're going to show them, Chun said, why humanity is the species every other civilization fears just a little bit. Not because we're the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced, but because when we go to war, we go to win. She let that hang in the air for a moment. All ships will break formation and set course for the Zentari system at maximum speed, she commanded. Estimated arrival, 12 hours after the Vrex superhive. That means we'll be arriving after the battle has already started on the tactical displays. 50 human battleships began moving, their engines flaring to life after months of dormancy. Engineering. I want every reactor running at 110%, Chun ordered. Admiral, her chief engineer protested. That's beyond safety margins. I don't care about safety margins, Chun replied coldly. I care about getting the Zentari Prime before 40 billion people die. Now get me that speed. The Vrex superhive fleet entered the Zentari system like a living nightmare. 200,000 bioships, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that had evolved to inspire terror and prey species on the surface of the Zentari homeworld. 40 billion people looked up at their sky and watched it darken as the swarm blotted out the star's ambassador. Calrus stood in the Planetary Defense Center, deep underground, watching tactical displays that showed her people's doom approaching. All defensive platforms are online, reported the defense coordinator. Fleet elements are moving to intercept. The Zentari home fleet numbered 3,000 ships, a respectable force under normal circumstances against 200,000 Vrex vessels. It was little more than a speed bump. They'll be in weapons range in 90 minutes, the coordinator continued. His voice tight with fear. Calrus felt her antennae droop with despair, then forced them upright. Her people needed to see strength. Even if it was a lie, send fleet-wide transmission, she ordered. All ships are authorized to fight with honor. If they must fall, let them fall protecting their homeworld. as her ships moved to meet the overwhelming enemy force. Cowers thought about the human fleet racing toward them through the dark 12 hours. Admiral Chun had said, 12 hours after the wrecks arrived, would there be anything left to save by then? The first wave of wreck ships crashed into the Zentari defensive line like a tsunami. Against the sand-cast Zenari cruisers fired their plasma cannons with desperate fury, destroying dozens of enemy vessels. But the wrecks barely seemed to notice the losses for every bioship that fell. 10 more surged forward. Platform 7 has been destroyed. Someone called out in the defense center. Platform 12 is reporting critical damage. The carrier group at coordinates 885 has been overrun. Calrus watched her fleet being systematically dismantled, watched her people dying in the cold void of space, and felt helpless rage building in her chest. This was what humanity had promised to prevent. This was why they had agreed to unleash the monsters, but the humans were still hours away, and her people were dying now. The carrier, relentless, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zentari system 12 hours later, exactly as Admiral Chun had calculated behind her. 49 other human warships materialized in perfect formation. Tactical. Give me a situation report, Chun ordered from her command chair. The tactical officer's face was grim as he studied his displays. Admiral, the Zentari home fleet has been reduced to less than 400 ships. Defensive platforms are at 30% capacity. The wrecks have achieved orbital dominance over 70% of the planet. Casualties? Zentari military. Estimated 90% losses. Civilian casualties. The officer paused. Preliminary estimates suggest 3 billion dead in the orbital bombardment. Chun felt her jaw clench. 3 billion people, while the human fleet had been racing to reach them. Are the wrecks still engaged? She asked. Yes, Merle. They're systematically destroying remaining defenses before beginning full-scale planetary assault. Chun stood from her chair. Then we're not too late. Communications, open a channel on all frequencies. I want every wreck ship and every Alliance vessel to hear this. Channel open. Admiral, Chun's voice carried across the void. Transmitted through space on every wavelength, the wrecks might be monitoring. Wrecks forces. This is Admiral Chun Wei of the Human Alliance Fleet. You have one opportunity to withdraw from this system immediately and cease hostilities against Alliance members on the displays. The wreck swarm continued its assault without pause. The hive mind did not negotiate, did not communicate, simply consumed 30 seconds to comply. Chun continued. Her voice cold and professional. The seconds ticked by. The wrecks ignored the warning. Admiral, our executive officer said quietly, they're not going to respond. They're a hive mind. They don't even understand the concept of surrender. I know, Chun replied. I just needed it on the record that we tried. She took a breath, thinking one last time about who she had been before this moment. Then let that person go. All ships, she commanded. Deploy Prometheus packages. Authorization code, Omega-7 Tango Blackout. Throughout the human fleet. Weapons bays opened and small devices shot out into space, spreading across the battlefield. In a carefully calculated pattern, the lines. Observers who had been embedded on human ships to monitor their compliance with the rules of engagement watched with confusion. A Corthan observer aboard the destroyer Unrelenting asked the ship's captain, what are those devices? They don't appear to be weapons? The captain smiled grimly. They're not, they're worse. The Prometheus packages activated simultaneously. And suddenly, every wreck ship in the system began receiving a transmission. It wasn't data or communications in any traditional sense. It was experience raw. Sensory input from every wreck's organism that had died in the past 3 months of warfare. The hive mind, which processed information from millions of bioships simultaneously, suddenly found itself experiencing death from thousands of individual perspectives all at once. Every scream, every moment of pain, every final thought of every killed Rex played through the hive mind's collective consciousness. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Rex formation broke apart as the hive mind recoiled from the psychological assault, ships moving erratically, some firing on each other in their confusion. "Sir," the Corthan observer stammered, "what have you done to them?" "We gave them empathy," the captain replied coldly. "Humans learned a long time ago that the fastest way to break an enemy isn't to kill their bodies. It's to break their minds." Admiral Chun watched as the Rex superhive descended into chaos. "All ships, begin attack pattern Reaper 7. Target their command organisms first, then work through their fleet systematically." The human warships moved forward with mechanical precision, unlike the Zentari, who had fought defensively, trying to protect their world while engaging the enemy. The humans simply attacked human destroyers, launched swarms of AI-controlled drones, weapons that the Alliance had banned decades ago as too cruel for civilized warfare. The drones didn't just destroy Rex ships. They infiltrated them, spreading through their organic systems like viruses, causing the bioships to tear themselves apart from within human. Cruisers used weapons that targeted the bioelectric systems of Rex vessels, causing cascade failures that left the ships drifting and helpless before kinetic strikes finished them off. "Admiral," the tactical officer reported, "Rex forces are attempting to regroup in Sector 4. Target their rally point with Scorched Star packages." Chun ordered without hesitation. "Admiral," one of her junior officers protested, "that sector is close to the Zentari outer colonies." "I know where it is, Lieutenant," Chun replied. "Execute the order." 3 human battleships fired specialized torpedoes at the Zentari systems. Outer Sun, a small red dwarf that provided minimal heat to the distant settlements. The torpedoes burrowed into the star's surface and detonated devices designed to destabilize its magnetic field. The star convulsed, releasing a massive burst of radiation that swept across the outer system. Thousands of Rex ships caught in the blast were instantly sterilized, their organic components burned away by the wave of deadly energy. Outer colonies are reporting radiation exposure, the communications officer said quietly. "Casualties?" Chun asked. "None yet, but the settlements will be uninhabitable for..." He checked his console. "Estimated 500 years due to residual radiation." Chun felt a weight settle on her shoulders. She had just made part of the Zentari system, unlivable for centuries, but tens of thousands of Rex ships were now debris instead of threats. The mathematics of war were brutal and simple. Sacrifice the few to save the many. Sacrifice the land to save the people. Continue the assault, she ordered. Throughout the human fleet, Marines and pilots fought with an efficiency that horrified the Alliance observers. A Malian observer aboard the fighter carrier Retribution watched human pilots engage Rex biofighters in close combat. The human pilots didn't fight with honor or courage. They fought like they were exterminating vermin when Rex fighters attempted to surrender by breaking off and fleeing. Human pilots pursued them relentlessly, destroying every single one. "Your pilots are killing non-combatants," the Malian observer protested to the carrier's air commander. "Those aren't non-combatants," the commander replied. "Those are Rex fighters attempting tactical withdrawal so they can regroup and attack again. We don't allow tactical withdrawals. But the rules of engagement. The rules of engagement authorize unrestricted warfare," the commander interrupted. "We're following them precisely. We're only targeting Rex military assets. You're targeting everything." "Exactly," the commander said, his voice cold. "In human military doctrine, a retreating enemy is still an enemy. A damaged ship is still a ship. A survivor is still a potential combatant. We don't leave threats alive to strike at us later." The Melian observer felt sick as he watched human fighter wings systematically hunt down every Rex vessel trying to escape the system in the Zentari Defense Center. Ambassador Kelleris watched the tactical display with a mixture of relief and horror. The human fleet, just 50 ships against 200,000 Rex vessels, was winning, not just winning, dominating 6 hours of combat. The humans had destroyed over 100,000 Rex bioships while losing only 2 of their own vessels. But the cost. 3 weeks after the Battle of Zentari Prime, the Galactic Council convened again in the same chamber where they had voted to revoke Protocol 7 Alphaith. Atmosphere was different now, not desperate, not urgent, but heavy with the weight of decisions that could not be unmade. Ambassador Kelleris stood at the central podium once more, but her compound eyes seemed darker, dimmed by what she had witnessed. Commander Thaurus sat in the Corthan section, his forearms resting on his console, his orange skin pale in a way that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. The Melian representative Keeper Solus was present via hologram. Still unable to return to a homeworld that no longer existed, Loomis the Assyri floated in silence, his crystalline structure refracting light and muted. Sorrowful patterns and high above in the observation deck. Admiral Shen Wei sat with her senior staff, waiting to hear the judgment that everyone knew was coming. 3 weeks ago, Kelleris began. We made a decision that saved 40 billion of my people. The Vrex superhive was destroyed, and the invasion has ended. The enemy has withdrawn completely from Alliance space. A murmur of acknowledgement ran through the chamber. But there was no celebration. We asked humanity to save us, Kelleris continued, and they did exactly what we asked. But in doing so, they showed us something that our ancestors understood, and we had forgotten. She gestured to the displays around the chamber, which now showed reports compiled by the Alliance observers embedded on human ships, page after page of detailed documentation, each one describing tactics and strategies that violated Alliance conventions of civilized warfare. The observers have filed their reports, Kelleris said. I will now call upon them to present their findings. A Corthan military observer named Drax stepped forward, the same young intelligence officer who had researched human history before the battle. Commander Thaurus, Ambassador Kelleris, honored delegates, he began. I observed the human fleet from aboard the destroyer Unrelenting during the Battle of Zentari Prime. What I witnessed, he paused, clearly struggling with his words. What I witnessed was the most efficient military operation I have ever seen. The humans destroyed over 195,000 enemy vessels in 18 hours, with minimal losses to their own forces. But, Kelleris prompted, knowing there was more. But the methods they used, Drax continued, violated 73 separate articles of the Alliance Warfare Convention. He brought up a list on the displays. Use of AI-controlled, autonomous weapons designed to maximize suffering, deliberate psychological warfare targeting enemy mental state rather than military capabilities, destruction of surrendering or retreating forces, deployment of environmental weapons affecting civilian infrastructure, targeting of enemy medical and support vessels, continuation of combat against disabled enemies, use of weapons specifically designed to cause prolonged suffering. The list went on and on. In one instance, Drax said, his voice shaking slightly, I witnessed a human captain order the complete destruction of a Vrex bioship that was clearly attempting to withdraw from combat. When I asked why they didn't accept the surrender, the captain explained that Vrex don't surrender, they regroup. He looked up at Admiral Chun in the observation deck. The captain was correct. Later analysis confirmed that every Vrex vessel that escaped our previous battles returned to fight again. The humans' refusal to allow any enemy to escape meant that the Vrex could not rebuild their forces. Commander Thaurus stood slowly. Observer Drax, I have read your report. Tell the Council, did the humans target civilian populations? No, sir, Drax replied. Every human weapon was directed at Rex military assets. Did they destroy Zentari infrastructure unnecessarily? No, sir. The damage to the outer colonies was a side effect of the Scorched Star weapon, which destroyed 17,000 Rex vessels in a single strike. Tharos' four hands clenched. Then, by the letter of the authorization we gave them. The humans violated no orders. That is correct, sir, Drax confirmed. But by the spirit of civilized warfare, there is nothing civilized about warfare, Tauros interrupted, his voice harder than anyone had ever heard it. I have fought in 16 campaigns before this one, and every time I fought with honor, following the rules, treating enemies with respect. And every time, good people died because we gave our enemies chances to regroup, to retreat, to return. He swept his gaze across the chamber. The humans don't fight for honor or glory. They fight to win, and because they fight to win, they saved 40 billion lives in a single day. So tell me, delegates, which is more civilized? Following rules while billions die, or breaking rules while billions live? The chamber erupted into arguments. Some delegates agreed with Tharos. Others were horrified at his suggestion that the ends justified the means. Skelris struck her podium repeatedly to restore order. Commander Tharos makes a valid point. But we must also consider what we have unleashed. She gestured to another observer. This one, Emilian, who had served aboard the human carrier Relentless Observer Shari. Please share your findings. The Emilian woman stepped forward, her face drawn and tired. I spent 3 weeks embedded with human forces. I ate with them, spoke with them, watched them work. And I can tell you that the humans who fought at Zentari Prime are not the same humans who entered that battle. Explain. Kelleris requested. Before the battle, I met a human pilot named Lieutenant Morrison. Shari continued. She showed me pictures of her children, told me about her home, laughed at my jokes. After the battle, I saw the same pilot standing over the wreckage of a Rex fighter she had destroyed, and her face was empty. No joy in victory, no relief at survival, just nothing. Shari's voice broke slightly. I asked her how many Rex fighters she had destroyed. She said 47. I asked how she felt about it. She looked at me with dead eyes and said, I feel nothing, and that's what scares me most. The Emilian observer wiped tears from her face. The humans saved us. But in doing so, they sacrificed something inside themselves. I watched warriors become executioners, strategists become architects of nightmares, and good people become monsters because we asked them to. Admiral Chun stood in the observation deck, listening to the reports with her face carefully neutral inside. She felt each word like a physical blow. Everything the observers said was true. She had watched her crew change during the battle, watched the light fade from their eyes as they did things that no civilized being should have to do. She thought about Lieutenant Morrison, who had once been bright and cheerful and who now woke up screaming every night. She thought about Captain Rodriguez, who couldn't look at himself in the mirror anymore. She thought about her own reflection that morning, and how she had barely recognized the person staring back at her below. Kelleris was speaking again. We have reviewed all the evidence. The humans fulfilled their mission exactly as we asked. They saved my world and ended the Vrex invasion. She paused, letting the silence stretch. But we also understand now why Protocol 7 Alpha existed. It wasn't created to protect humanity from us. It was created to protect all of us from what humanity becomes when the restrictions are removed. Commander Tharos stood again. Ambassador, what are you proposing? I propose that we reinstate Protocol 7 Alpha immediately, Kelleris said. With a new understanding of its purpose, she looked up at Admiral Chun. For the benefit of everyone, hold the human battleships distant from war, not because humans are weak, not because they are unreliable, but because they are our most terrible weapon. A weapon we should only use when we have absolutely no other choice. The motion was seconded by Loomis, the ossuary keeper Celis. Appearing via hologram, added her voice. The humans saved 40 billion Zentari lives. But they cannot save the souls they sacrificed to do it. We owe them a debt we can never repay. The debt of never asking them to become monsters again unless there is no other way. The vote was called. Every species voted yes. Protocol 7 Alpha was reinstated unanimously. With a new addendum. Human ingenuity in peacetime is a gift to the Alliance. Human ingenuity in warfare is a curse upon all who witness it. They are our last resort because they are our most effective and most terrible weapon. May we never need to call upon them again. Admiral Chung was summoned to address the council before the human fleet departed. She stood at the central podium where Ambassador Kelris had stood so many times. Looking out at the assembled delegates. 3 months ago, she began. You created Protocol 7 Alpha and asked humanity to stay distant from your war. You had good reasons based on our history, our nature, our willingness to do what others consider unthinkable. She saw many delegates looking away, unable to meet her eyes. Then the Vrex came, and suddenly our terrible nature was exactly what you needed. So you revoked the protocol and asked us to save you. Her voice grew harder. And we did. We saved 40 billion Zentari lives. We ended an invasion that had already killed tens of billions across multiple worlds. We won your war in 18 hours. She paused. And now you want to walk us away again because you're frightened of what we had to become to achieve that victory. Commander Thalros started to stand, perhaps to defend the decision. But Chun raised her hand. I'm not complaining, she said. I'm explaining. You see, you're right to be frightened. You're right to reinstate the protocol. You're right to keep us distant from war. She looked around the chamber.